You felt you could change the world, right? And you worked hard for that. But some people would say you communists were super dedicated, you know, nose to the grindstone, no fun at all, work, work, work.
That's a lot of bullshit.
Well,
They're talking about some party members.
but not, you weren't like that?
No, no. I always took time out to relax. And some of my party comrades felt I relaxed a little bit too much for a party leader.
You mean it was sort of a problem?
Yeah, that was a problem for them. It was never a problem for me. Because I knew when to have a good time. And I knew where the good times were, and I included them in my itinerary. Even though I worked 18 hours a day, I always believed that all work and no play not only made Jack a dull boy, but it made him grim. And I did not want to be grim.
Even if you were a communist?
Right. Particularly because I was telling people, you know, join the party and really live. Get a deeper comprehension of life. And life should be joyous.
You think you had a counterculture. I always am amused. We had a counterculture from the 30s and the 40s that I would suggest was far more all-powerful, all-inclusive than anything than the generation of the 60s, the young left, thought they had created. There were picnics, there were dances, there were parties. There was an enormous amount of singing. One could really live one's whole life totally within that culture. There was no dividing line between the personal and the political, between the private and the social. It was all intertwined and intermingled.
All your loves were part of it too, your friends and your relationships and the kids growing up together. I mean, you had a kind of a whole total world that really was very rich in many ways.
I tell you, I could cry thinking of the excitement and the pride and the feeling we had. We just marched through the streets with pride and feeling that we are the people that count. May Day was such a holiday. I remember when our children were little, we used to carry them on our shoulders. There was something that we were so excited about. It meant so much to us.
You just felt that day you owned New York City. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people. The John Reed Clubs would have poets out reciting poetry. The John Reed Club, the artist section of the John Reed Club did all of these banners for different organizations. Tremendous, tremendous, tremendous things.
Socialism wasn't the only political movement to grow during the Depression. In Italy and Germany, fascist parties came to power with claims of solving the deepening economic crisis. Communists around the world made the defeat of fascism their top priority. The first battle against fascism began not with World War II, but in Spain. In 1936, the Spanish military revolted against the democratically elected left-wing government. Civil war broke out. While the Western democracies took no action, Hitler and Mussolini came in on the side of Franco, supplying massive arms and aid.
Hitler was getting powerful. There were Jewish pogroms being committed. And there was nothing in my soul that was more devastating than to see the Nazis laughing, bastards, laughing while they dragged some poor Jewish woman naked across the street through spit and manure and everything else and threw her on the sidewalk by the back of the neck, write Jew all over the windows, you know, all this type of stuff. I mean, because I saw that was my family that they were doing it to. You know, if they could do it to Jews, they could do it to my mother. And that son of a bitch, no son of a bitch was going to do it. And something had to be done, you know. And I said, I don't care how, I've just got to get to Spain.
When you're a communist and you're an organizer and you're in the streets, there's always a cop, there's always the detective, and there's always the official violence, which you're not allowed to answer as a communist. You can't strike back. But you knew that if you went to Spain, that if you were a soldier and if you had a gun, and I knew about guns, then that would be different. You would be legal, and you'd do right.
3,200 Americans went to fight for Spain, along with 40,000 men and women from around the world. These international brigades were organized primarily by the communist movement in an attempt to counter Franco's military superiority.
The Franco forces were getting more and more equipment and sophisticated equipment in the way of planes, tanks, artillery from Italy and from Germany. I remember after I was wounded, there were a few of us were crossing an open field, and 9 planes draped just a handful of men. Now, what are they going to afford to waste ammunition like that? You know, to give you an idea of the ridiculousness of the odds.
We had 3 guns for almost 300 men. I know it seems incredible, but that's truth.
Must have made it hard to fight the war.
Well, they didn't. They died. Hundreds of them that night, in one night. Jarama was on hills. And the idea was there was to be an artillery barrage. And then the kids went over. And I forget how many hundreds died and how many hundreds were wounded. And then those of us who had not gone over had to go out and get them and bring them in and bring them around to ambulances that had to be summoned quickly.
How'd you feel about that, Michael?
Well, during the night, Julie, handling sick, demoralized people, I didn't think about it at all. Just trying to get them back out of harm's way.
I didn't like the idea of getting hit and wounded and banged up. Who wants it anyway? But if I had to do it again, I would have done it anyway, because I think it was a good cause. And if you believe in something, you do it. You know, theory is one thing, but practice is, I think, is more important at certain times, in certain places.
The Republicans were badly outgunned and outsupplied. They appealed again and again for help, but no aid came. In the spring of 1939, Spain fell to Franco. Within months, over 150,000 people were executed.
It was the crux of everything that we were involved in, everything we were doing. It was all being fought out. And I think we saw very clearly that it was sort of the prelude to probably a much bigger war, which indeed it was.
England, France, and the U.S. had stood by while Hitler advanced in Europe. The Soviet Union repeatedly called